Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Yesham Erez. I'm with Admittance Education, and I have a couple colleagues in the room from Admittance Education as well. We are ethical educational consultants working mostly with Turkish students out of Turkey and the United States. And if you need any help with your college admission process or application process, please get a hold of us. But today we have a wonderful guest. Justin Van Dyke is here with us, and he will talk about the essay process and in detail. And with that, I'll just turn it over to him to introduce himself. And he's the star of the show today. So I will moderate. So if you need to ask questions in Turkish, you can do so. We can translate. And you can add your questions on the chat, and I'll just be letting people in, etc., as through the meeting. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. So my name is Justin Van Dyke, and I represent New York University, and in particular their campus in Abu Dhabi. So I think just to start off by way of introduction, it may be important to kind of address the elephant in the room of, where is New York University? It's not as straightforward a question as you might expect, given that the name of our institution is New York University. We do have our main campus in New York, but we're actually a global network. So when students apply to NYU, we're actually asking them to consider 3 different campuses, one in New York, one in Shanghai, and one in Abu Dhabi. So exact same university, exact same diploma, degree, but each campus is a little bit different in terms of what it has to offer. All 3 of them have a really wide range of academic programs in liberal arts and sciences and engineering. And we have a huge range of programs. The Abu Dhabi campus in particular is unique in that it's kind of like an international honors program. We only admit around 500 to 600 students per year, but those students come from over 120 different countries with no majority from any one part of the world. So it's kind of like a mini UN on campus. It's radically diverse. So students have this very international experience on campus. And we also require them to study abroad. So they'll spend some time in New York, some time in Shanghai. So it's a very international experience. We also do have scholarships and can meet full demonstrated financial needs for admitted students. So if you're considering a US institution, but are interested in one that will give a very international opportunity, this is a really unique prospect, and I encourage you to explore a little bit more. And obviously, I'm more than happy to help with any questions you have on that. But I won't delay any further. I want to go ahead and launch into this program on essay writing. I told Yashin before that this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. My background is actually in classics, and so I really like the arts and writing and these kinds of creative things. And so talking about this process with students is a really enjoyable thing for me. I often find that the best place to start when describing what this essay is actually to tell you what this essay is not. For most students in Turkey, this is a very different kind of essay than you've probably written before. So it's not an academic essay. This is not something that you would write for, your biology class or a research paper or something like that, or talking about something that you are very fond of studying. I mean, it could be about that, but it's not academic. It's also not a list of extracurricular activities. So this is not the CV where you list all of the amazing accomplishments you have. We do want to hear about that, but this is not the place. It's also not a letter of motivation. This is not the place for you to tell us how much you want to come to our university. Again, we do want to hear about that, but just not here. And really, honestly, it shouldn't be anything we can find anywhere else in your application. This is really a chance to share something new. So your essay should tell us something new that we can't find from just looking at the grades that you received or the list of extracurricular activities. It should also set yourself apart. I often tell students to imagine that, okay, your doppelganger or evil twin or whoever it is, both of you have the exact same grades, the exact same activities, you went on the same trips, and you're both applying to the same university. Now, what can you say? What can you share that will set yourself apart from this other person? What are the unique, what's your unique worldview that you can share in this part? It should also show off your very best ability to express yourself in English, and I really highlight your ability here, not your English teacher or your older sibling or your favorite author. This is the time for your voice to come through. And then finally, it should be interesting. I mean, this is a chance to get creative. This is not just, again, a CV or a list of things. You can use literary techniques here, and you should pull in the reader. You should make them want to learn more about who you are and draw them into your world. So this is a chance to get creative. And I'll talk about a bit more about this later on. I know not everyone, writes in the same style or is eager to write in this way, but it is a chance to share your own voice. And at the end of the day, it should not be boring. It should draw the reader in and make us want to learn more about your experiences and what you're sharing. And then the final tip here, I would say, is that it needs to be both a combination of a good topic and a good approach. And I'll give some examples of this, but this doesn't always line up. You may have a really good subject that you want to talk about, but you can talk about it in a really boring way that's maybe not very engaging. Likewise, you could have something that sounds maybe kind of boring or maybe not something you would normally talk about, but talk about it in an exciting way that makes us want to learn more about it. So that's something to keep in mind as you're going through the process. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to share my 4-step process. Other people may do it in a different way, but it's just kind of a way to start thinking about how to approach this essay. So sorry, I keep sitting in front of the prompts. So the first step is just to look at all of the prompts. I'll be referencing the Common application. There are other questions that some universities will ask, but generally they'll give you a few options. And a lot of times what students will kind of automatically do is they'll just look at the list, pick one, and write their essay and leave it there, which is fine. Sometimes that works out, but you're really not giving yourself a lot of options if you do that. So my first advice is to look at the list of prompts for the Common App. It's actually 6 different prompts. Look at those and see if you can come up with an idea for each of them. Just think, okay, if I had to write the essay, what would my topic be? Or what would my approach be? And then look at those and ask yourself, okay, which one is the most unique and personal to me? Which one will tell a story that no one else might be telling? What's going to share something new about me? Is it going to share something that admissions doesn't already know? And then once you start getting a feel for what that is, then you can start narrowing down your options. So pick 2 or maybe even 3 that you feel are really calling to you and are really interesting. And go ahead and, you could write an outline. You could come up with the idea of, your introduction and, the body and the conclusion and kind of say, okay, here's what I would talk about. Or if you're already feeling particularly inspired, you can go ahead and, just start writing the introduction. But go ahead and pick a couple of them and just see where they carry you. And come back to these same questions again and say, is this still unique and personal to me? Is it expressing the ideas that I want the university to know about me? Is it telling about personal qualities or accomplishments or things that are new details that I want admissions to know about? And then hopefully after you've done this with a couple of them, you'll have a really clear idea of which one is going to work for you. And so for that 3rd step, go ahead and write the full draft. Take it from an outline and write your draft and keep returning to the same questions. You want to make sure that you're on track, that it's unique, that it's sharing positive things about you, and also go back and make sure that you're actually answering the question. Sometimes when we get kind of carried away and we write, sometimes we'll kind of get off track, which is totally fine. That happens. You do want to make sure that you're answering the question. And you're answering all of the parts of the prompts, which I'll talk about in a bit. But also, one thing I want to mention here, that the point of this exercise is not to have the very best answer anyone has ever had to this question. That's not what we're looking for. We're really looking for you to use this as kind of a touchstone, a chance to use this question to reveal things about yourself. So, it's kind of the same way how we talk about, the journey is as important as the destination in this case. So don't get too focused on just, having the best answer ever, and use it more as the prompt. You also want to make sure that everything is well organized and clear and interesting to read. There's a difference between having a complex essay and an overcomplicated essay. So, there are circumstances where you may want to use some kind of, unusual formatting or something, but you want to make sure that, at the end of the day, it's still readable. An example from a few years ago was there was a student who wrote their essay in the format of a computer program, and I'm not at all a comp sci person, but I could totally read this and know what the student was writing. So it was a really creative way to show that this was something the student was interested in and kind of show off the personality. So it can be something that's maybe a little bit different, but still at the end of the day, it should be clear. And you'll want to remember that universities, in most circumstances, your essay will be read once, maybe 1.5 times. So if it's overcomplicated, then that's not going to work well. So keep that in mind. And this really takes me on to the final step, which is to get feedback. So, edit, revise, and rewrite. Take your essay to your advisor, your teacher, your best friend, your parents, and ask them these same questions that you've been asking yourself. Is this interesting? Is this unique to me? What are you learning about me? And if it's your best friend, ask them. You know me really well. If you found this essay and my name wasn't on this essay, would you know that it's about me? Does my personality really come out here? Likewise, you could also ask, your advisor, your parents, if you didn't know me and you read this essay, what kinds of things would you learn about this person from reading this essay? So this is just a really good checkpoint to make sure that you're communicating the things that you think that you're communicating, and to get feedback from them. Of course, basic feedback about grammar and writing. Again, at the end of the day, we do want to hear your voice, so you shouldn't be having someone, completely rewrite or edit your essay. But just to have another pair of eyes look over it, and also ask them if there are any gaps. When we're telling stories about ourselves, because it happened to us, we already know everything. So sometimes when you're writing a story, you'll leave out some important information. So just ask them, to make sure that everything is kind of clear and concise and easy to read. So I know that this sounds like a lot of work, but I promise you this is not a difficult thing if you take your time and just give yourself the time to go through these steps and get feedback. So that's kind of the process. I'll share this with you later so that you can look at them for the slide deck. But really for the rest of the presentation, I want to kind of go over some sample prompts. So I'm not going to go over all of these, but this is the full set of 6 and 7 prompts that are in the Common App. I'll just cover maybe the first 2. And I'll give some examples for each one. Most of these are made up. Some of them are real. Some of them are good. Some of them are bad. Some of them are in the middle. It's not all completely, completely clear cut. But as I go through these, I'm going to ask you for your feedback, if anybody wants to give feedback. And so let's just go ahead and get started. So this is the first question. Some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that's so meaningful, they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. So let's see. For example A, we have a student who says, I am of this nationality, which means I speak in this unique way, and I have these unique traditions and eat these unique foods that I bet you've never heard of. So if we have an essay that's has this approach and this topic, what kind of feedback would you give? And Yashin, feel free to volunteer as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna just see if anybody wants to say it in Turkish. Come on, there are some students who are working with us in the group. They're all excellent, and I think they'll have an opinion because they always have opinions because this is what we learn. That exhibits critical thinking. Emre, hadi. Come on.
Maybe it may share something about your identity, but I think it's not interesting for you to read because like for example, he or she is from Turkey. So when you Google Turkey, you can see the traditions. So it's not really interesting, I think.
Exactly. It's like a Wikipedia article. I end up learning more about the country and not specifically about the student. That's a good point. I also see this sometimes when there are essays where students choose to write about their grandmother, who was this amazing person and did all of these incredible things that are very impressive. But I get to the end of the essay and I think, I think I know more about this student's grandmother than I know about the student. So yeah, the same thing. You want to make sure that you're connecting, personally and through this topic, talking about the personal points that connect you with it. How about for the second one? I want to study business. I excel in all these questions. I won these awards. This one's kind of a gimme, but any feedback if your friend brought you this essay?
Anyone in the room?
So I think that it's more of like a CV than a personal essay.
Mhm.
So I think that you can already see that in their resume.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's not impossible to talk about these things. Maybe you really are passionate about studying business because some of life experience you've had or something that made it very important to you, and you could tell that story. So it's not that you can't talk about studying business, but as you said, this is starting to sound like a CV, just talking about it in this way. And then for this last one, we have a student who said, I don't just listen to music, I'm an avid musicologist. Let me tell you about the opera of my life, and in particular, the last chapter, my jazz stage.
I think we
Any
want to read
feelings
that
about
one.
this one?
We want to read that one.
Yeah, there's a hook there. Like, I want to know what the jazz stage is. Like, you've kind of set up this creative hook at the beginning, and we see that that this is going to carry through, and this kind of creative thing can really draw in the reader. So this is a good start. Again, this could go sideways as well. If I get halfway through the essay and I can't tell if we're in the punk rock era or the gangster rap era, and I'm kind of lost in all of these comparisons, that might be too far. But overall, this is a really great start to hear about this interest that is so important for this student. Great. I'll jump on to the next one now. So this one is kind of a question on failure. I think almost every university or everyone has had a question like this before. So the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? So one thing I want to point out right away is that a lot of these questions have multiple parts. So here you can see recount a time when you faced a challenge. That's the first question. Then, how did it affect you? And what did you learn? So there are actually three questions going on here that you want to make sure that you address, and we'll talk a bit about how that balances out. So for example, A, we have a student who said, I failed grade 11 math because I had a teacher who didn't know how to teach well. I want to study engineering, and I know I'll do better with a good teacher. So let me ask you this question now. You're the university, you're the admissions representative, and you get this essay. What kinds of things are you learning about this student?
Oh, we have some really good essay whizzes in the room. So who's next?
They shift blame.
Yeah, not taking responsibility for themselves. Also, probably that they suck at math. Not necessarily a good thing. Let me ask a different question then. Is there a way that, so I think this is a good example of the topic and the approach. So the topic is that this student failed grade 11 math. And the approach obviously is not working here. But let's say this happened to you in real life and you were going to write an essay about it. How could you approach this in a more positive way? Any ideas?
Maybe you can take the blame and say that you will take responsibility for that and advance yourself in that particular area.
Yeah, absolutely. So say, this unfortunate thing happened. Maybe it was during the pandemic, maybe you had trouble transitioning classes, or maybe there was something going on with the teacher. And if you said, I made a study group with my peers, or we were talking with the administration and trying to find a solution. There's a way that you can come out of this as being the leader, as having kind of resolved something difficult. And that's kind of the point of this question. So to recount that failure. Obviously, that's not the thing that you want to spend most of your time about. We do want to hear, of course, how it affected you, but the big part here is what did you learn from the experience? So if we receive this whole essay that's just this whole sob story about this terrible thing that happened, then at the end, and this happens pretty frequently, you'll get the whole story at the end. It's like, and then I learned the valuable lesson that I took responsibility for myself and everything was great. We want to hear more about the last part. So, the personal changes that you had, or what you did to resolve that, rather than just kind of tying it up neatly at the end. I'll go ahead and give the second example. And actually, this is NYU Abu Dhabi's very first director of admissions. This was her college essay that got her into Yale. So hopefully it's not pretty good here. And she wrote, "As I started my final lap in the pool, the entire crowd was cheering, including every other swimmer, all of whom had finished long before me and were grabbing their towels. If I set any records that day, it only could have been for the slowest time. But without my participation, my school could not have even qualified." So same question again. What do you learn about this student?
The student is very determined.
Yeah, definitely. You can see that, even though she probably didn't feel good about continuing on, she was going to lose, and probably most of us would want to just like give up and get out of the pool, but she knew that her team was relying on her and stuck with it.
Selfless, maybe.
Who said that?
Yeah,
Like she's not doing this for her. She's doing this for the team.
exactly. Yeah. Even though she probably had really negative feelings about this, she knew that the team was counting on her. Yeah, great point.
Such a good comment. Who said that? Can I give you 5 stars?
I
Good job.
yeah.
Uh,
Oh, nice job. Sorry.
Um, a couple of the things I just want to point out here, just because I think there's some good examples of, and probably when you hear people talking about essays and writing, they always say show and don't tell. I think here, where she starts in the middle of the action, when she says the entire crowd was cheering, including every other swimmer, um, probably in your mind, you can imagine yourself at a pool somewhere. You could hear the crowd, maybe even smell the chlorine. Like, there's something really magical about being able to pull someone into your world and experience what you're experiencing. So instead of just, listing off what it was, I was at a swim meet and I was last and blah, blah, blah. You really get pulled into what's going on. And if you can do this, again, not everyone has to write in this way, but if you can do this, if you think about it, it makes it really intimate and makes you really close. So you can almost imagine, what that person was feeling and seeing and experiencing. And if you can do this, this is what you want to do. This is how to make that connection. I think some of the best essays are ones that are almost like a 3D portrait, where you can feel like, you're having a conversation with the person, or you're experiencing the same things that they're experiencing. So again, this is not something you have to do, but, as you're writing, think about that. What is the other person, when you're writing this, will other people be able to understand, and feel some of the same things that you're feeling going through this. So I'll just look at one more really quickly, because I think this example, or at least one of these examples, is a good way to talk about extracurricular activities, even though I said at the beginning not to talk about something that we already know about you. So for this one, it says, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking and what was the outcome? So in answer A, we have a student who said, in my culture, a man should aim for a good career and a woman should aim for a happy family. I don't think this is fair. So, on paper, this I mean, this is a belief or an idea that they're challenging. It's a really big one. And I would say, you know, that's totally fine. You don't have to have small problems and have a solution to them in answering this question. You know, you can pick something big, like inequality between the genders. But with this, I would want to see this developed a little bit more and kind of see, okay, we see here that you don't think this is fair, but we want to hear the story. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? What did you do about this? What changes did you make? So that's a little bit simplistic. For example, B, the student said, growing up, no one even spoke to me about engineering. It didn't seem like an option for a girl. But by 10th grade, I'd subscribed to 2 magazines, 5 YouTube channels, and my top Google results were how do you make and how to take apart. By 11th grade, I held our school's first Made by Girls meeting and had 20 elementary school girls bring in clocks to deconstruct. This year, our first meeting had 60 girls. So let me ask the same question again. What do you learn about this student? Of course, we probably would have seen this list in the list of extracurricular activities that she had the Made by Girls Club and that she was the leader. But what else are we learning from hearing about this narrative and how this happened?
Like she's actually really determined to like diminish the gender stereotyping based on like which major you pursue. So
Exactly.
she combined her
So,
interest of, like engineering with that determination as well.
absolutely. We can see that she, you know, there's the idea that she was challenging. We can see the clear example of what prompted her thinking, and then the outcome. And I would say even more than that, we saw that once she did this for herself, she also wanted to make sure that she was propping the door open for everyone else in her school and in her community. We could also see that she was able to scale this up from, 20 girls to 60 girls. So this, and talking about this extracurricular activity, we get all of these other things. So this is something to keep in mind. If you do choose to talk about, an activity or a club or something, make sure that you can include all this other information and talk about these things. And I'm sure as you'll hear from other advisors that, this is your chance to brag and really give us all of this information and give us the full story. Even if for you it doesn't seem like a big thing, it's really important to share all of these parts. So let's see here. So I'll just mention briefly this the 7th prompt, which is kind of to choose your own adventure. So you can pick any topic of your choice, which is actually a pretty popular one. I think a lot of students end up using this, but there are a few big caveats, a few big warnings I want to give here. Of course, it should not be an academic paper or something that you're just kind of reusing, or just a list of your accomplishments and activities. Really all of those things I told you at the beginning that it should not be. So you shouldn't be using this. I don't think any of you would, but as just a freebie to reuse some other essay. That's not to say there can't be essays that you can reuse for this if you've written in a similar way. But if you choose to choose your own topic, you really want to make sure that it's accomplishing all of these things that I've talked about before, that it's sharing these personal accomplishments or characteristics or things that we don't know elsewhere in your application, and that it's engaging and creative, and that's why it's so important to specifically, these other prompts are designed to do that by itself. So you want to make sure that if you choose your own, that it's going to serve the same purpose. And the very last thing I'll talk about is the school-specific essays. So many universities, in addition to the personal essay, so everything I've talked about so far is a general personal essay that typically for the Common App and other places will be to any university. It will just be the general personal statement. And then a lot of universities ask for one that's specific to themselves. And oftentimes the question can boil down to why us, out of all the other universities that you're applying to. So this should be something in most cases that's unique to every university. So there are some circumstances where you could kind of reuse one, but I think most of the time when you're exploring about the university, each one will be unique. So you shouldn't copy these. You also want to avoid just parroting things back, reading the website and saying, I want to come to your university because it's ranked #1 and blah, 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 and you have the most of these and blah, 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 which is great. That's fantastic. But we already know we're ranked #1 for blah, 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 or whatever it is. What's more important is why we're ranked #1 for you. You want to hear that personal connection. So it's almost like a love letter in a sense that you can say, okay, here are all the amazing things about your institution that I feel like I can't do anywhere else in the world. And here are the things that are important to me. And here's how we match up. So it's really important, again, not to just repeat things back to the university and to give just very general details. It is possible to answer this question if they're asking, why do you want to come to our university? And to say, I want to come because you have this program and I want to work with this professor and take this class. Those are all great. But at the end of the day, like that first kind of Wikipedia, my culture question, if you just repeat all the things about the university, then they don't know why they're also a fit for you. So take a little bit more time to reflect on that. And I do have a couple examples. The first one is obviously just kind of made up. I'm applying to Dream School because it's ranked #1 and it's the best. That you want to avoid. But this second one is the actual essay of an admitted student. And they said, my high school history teacher taught us about the Cold War by sharing his experience of living in post-Soviet Russia. He taught us about European history by talking about his experience living in Paris. We learned about art history by hearing about the museums he had visited in Florence. I was in awe of the way he had learned about the world, and now NYU AD is my chance to do this. I want to learn about Ethiopia through a roommate from Addis Ababa. I want to learn about China through a J-term class in Shanghai. I want to learn about the marine environment while kayaking through the mangroves in Abu Dhabi. So we can see in reading this that the student really understands the fact that we're kind of the opposite of the Zoom university, that we require students to spend semesters abroad and they end up studying in 4 or 5 different countries, and that we really want them to be on the ground experiencing these things in person. And this is really part of our DNA. We can see the student wants to learn in this way, and then lists a couple things that are just kind of, they're almost like winks in a way, saying like, I really know you. She said, without saying, I know that your students are from 120 different countries. She said, I want to learn about Ethiopia from having a roommate from Addis Ababa. She knows that for first-year students, we always pair them with someone from the opposite side of the world from them. She also knows that we have January term courses in the Shanghai campus that you can go to for 3 weeks, one January. And also, when most people hear of Dubai or Abu Dhabi, they kind of immediately talk about the steel and glass high-rise skyscraper, super modern city, or other people talk about the camels and deserts and palm trees. And the reality is a lot fewer people know that there are, mangrove reserves and national parks and there are green spaces really close to the campus. So all of these things show us that, this wasn't just a quick scan of the website, but she knows who we are and where we are. So I think this is kind of a masterful way to say that, I've done my research. Here are the things that are important to me, and here's how those fit. So again, you don't have to do it in exactly this format, but if you can find those touch points to say, okay, here's what's important to me, here's what's exciting to me, and here are the things that really fit up, that's a really great approach to it. So, and I won't talk about this NYU specific optional essay, but if you're interested in NYU, I can always talk about this at a later point. But I do want to leave you with just a few final tips. The big obvious one is give yourself plenty of time. I know this can feel like a really intimidating thing, and that it's, a lot of reflection and editing and revising, but it's not hard if you give yourself the time to do this. Also, I know a lot of times when you start to do essays like this, your first instinct is to, run and read, okay, what are the essays that got people into Harvard or this school or that school, and read those essays. And it can be a little bit overwhelming to do that. It can kind of short circuit your creative process. So if you do look for references, if you're using something like ChatGPT or something to get references, use that as a way to kind of get inspiration and not as a shortcut or a way to find a solution or an easy path. So I would say be very judicious about the sources that you use, the resources if you go looking. My suggestion is really not to do it at all, just to kind of use your own reflections, maybe find some writing exercises, creative writing exercises, these kinds of things, but really use it as a time to reflect on yourself. This really is kind of a navel gazing exercise to think about, who you are and what's important to you and how to tell your own story. And so, give yourself the time to do that. Again, I know it can feel like a really intimidating thing, but I promise you that, this can be a fun thing, and it's something that you'll be doing for the rest of your life, telling your story, whether you're applying for jobs or, fellowships or whatever it is, this ability to reflect about who you are, what's important to you, what you bring to the world, is a really key thing. So don't stress up about it too much. Use it as a time to learn more about yourself. And of course, spell check and proofread. These are basic things. Again, it doesn't have to be in perfect English. If there's a little problem here or there, that's totally fine. You also don't want to go the route of, using a thesaurus and using a lot of words that you're not familiar with, because, again, at the end of the day, that won't make it quite in your voice. But yeah, do take the time to enjoy the process and use it as a time of reflection. So I'll go ahead and open the floor for questions. I can see there's some already coming in. There was one, what about a student might add to the school campus, how much a student can do for the school? That's a great point. So a comment about the school-specific essay. If there's a particular club or activity that you've had, let's say you founded that Made by Girls Club, and that's something you want to continue doing at the university, you can definitely mention that. You can say, I see that you have, a design lab, or you have one of these things, and I would like to continue working there and doing something with that. That's a great thing to add on. Let's see. Great. Any other questions?
I don't see anything in the general chat per se.
Can I ask something?
Yeah,
Sure.
If that's okay.
of course it's okay.
Yeah, on average, how much time would you say you spend on one individual essay? So, application season essay comes across your desk. How long are you looking at it for, or what changes it?
So as at a point of advisement, one thing to clarify about my role is that I actually don't read essays. Well, I do read the essays, but I don't make any of the hard decisions about it. I do read them in passing. But in general, I think, and again, it will depend on the essay, and especially for NYU Abu Dhabi, since we spend a lot of time with them, since we have a smaller pool, I would say, it will really depend, like 5 minutes or so. It will depend on, again, how easy it is to read right off and how clear. And I would say, again, and it will depend on the university. I would say for us, a read and a half, if something is a little bit confusing, or again, if something, every year, of course, we have the amazing ones that we read over and over again and share with colleagues. But, when we're reading them, we do go through and kind of get the gist and the first reads. And if everything is there, then we can move on and to kind of considering the overall application. But yeah, that's about the amount of time. Let me
Thank you.
stop this share so I can see a little bit more from everyone. There we go.
Good question, though. So may I throw one out?
Yeah, please.
And that gives students here a chance to think of other questions as well. As you said in the beginning, sometimes it always has to be the student's authentic voice. So tell us when you notice that's not the case sometimes, how do you tell that it's not written by a 16, 17-year-old, right?
So I think it's mainly when things are either too smooth or too polished, or I mean, it's really kind of hard to put into words what exactly it is. I think to a degree, if it is, yeah, too overly polished, or there's just something. It's kind of the same thing if you read any kind of Chat GPT things. It's something that's just like, okay, all these parts make sense, but there's something a little hollow to it, or there's something that you feel like this student hasn't actually experienced this, or they're telling something or using language that's not their own. Funnily enough, sometimes I can tell definitely when they've written it, when there are like a couple errors, or they're maybe using a word that they're not entirely familiar with, or they're making mistakes that are kind of common to their native language. Those things are things that come through as authentic. So that's why I tell students not to stress too much about writing and perfectly polished English, because again, at the end of the day, as a non-native speaker, it will never be that way, and that's okay. There are lots of different varieties of English. But I would say, yeah, don't stress too much about like polishing it off, or having, again, like I said before, like having your best friend or older sibling who maybe has different language abilities than you, going through and writing in that way, because ultimately it will come out as their voice. Same thing if you decide to write as your favorite author or something like this.
Well, I like your description because basically you can tell. I want students here to hear that, very clearly. Don't have other people write your essays, guys. Like, that's not the idea here. So I just wanted to say that. Mete
Yeah.
Jessica has a question. I wondered, do you
Sure.
want to go next?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. And secondly, you said give yourself plenty of time at the end of the presentation. How much time should be spent on the essay from the start to finish, and how detailed of a like research should we make on it, because it's a personal essay?
So I think that can really depend from student to student, and kind of how much time you need to do it. I think the very basic answer to this is not to wait for the day before, or even the week before the essay is due. Like, I would say, again, it can be done in a shorter time. And Yashim, feel free to chime in here, because I think you probably have a wider sample than I do. But I think like a month or 2 weeks is a good time to kind of reflect and not to rush yourself, and to be able to kind of step away from it and then look back again. I don't know if you'd say the same.
I would, interested in what others have to add in the room, but yeah, we're basically, as soon as school is over, we're starting to do brainstorming on how to approach this and go exactly through what Justin just described, those prompts and how we might answer each one differently and what we want to communicate about ourselves. This is just as much strategy as it is literal, right? It's really good writing comes from good thinking, essentially. So what is it you want to communicate? It's definitely a month. And if you don't like what results at the end of the month, please don't despair, because in my experience, when I've seen people attempt a second one from scratch after that period, they're often frustrated, but I've never seen the second essay be worse than the first. Actually, they end up so much better. So don't be afraid to start over again, is what I want to say. Is that okay, or shall I take another question? Gunay has
Yeah, that's great.
Can I? I'm sorry if you mentioned this. I could only join midway through the presentation, but what sort of like tropes or stereotypes would you like warn against? I mean, I know about, like, for example, the sports injury, or what are, I guess, less known like tropes that make make the admissions officer going, oh, this again, like,
Yeah.
or do they exist?
Yeah. I think they definitely exist, and I think they change from year to year. But I think it is always, like you said, that like that sports injury or that misfortunate event that just gets tied up neatly in the end, and spends a lot of time just focusing on that failure or whatever, and then at the end doesn't really give us something unique. It misses out on that unique part, even though, and given a lot of times these can feel really unique in the moment for students, because again, they don't have that full snapshot of what everyone else is doing. So I can't think of specific examples, but I think a lot of those essays about kind of time to experience failure, again, that just get tied up really neatly in the end. Things, just talking really generally about like perseverance, or like a parent or someone being a role model. Again, there's, it's not that you can't write about these things, but if your, main message at the end of the day is just something like, and then I learned that you should never give up, or then I learned that you shouldn't judge people, like if there's a really neat and tidy kind of moral lesson in the end, those tend to feel a little bit, not fake, but they just feel really, really worn. So I would say, if, the specific quality or thing that you're showing off is just very general, then that can, not work out as well.
Great question. There's another one. Devin is asking. I was also at your information session for the common
Great.
today. Oh, good.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Glad you were able to make this.
Good. So the Common App, be careful. I mean, I know you guys probably discussed it yesterday. People are like, we're having students open up their accounts right now after their finals, but be careful because it'll be refreshed. So just try to stick to the general sections in your essay for the time being.
Yeah. I mentioned that yesterday, that you can start your account, but for most universities, they won't actually launch their application for a while.
Yeah. So what we're getting out of this is like once you're done with your finals, you should probably start to brainstorm and craft those essays, and you'll get a head start, and then it won't be so much pressure in the fall. So
yeah, and I would encourage you to just write in general. It doesn't have to be specifically doing an essay or any of these things. Just whatever you like to write or whatever's interesting to you. Just pick up some creative writing exercises to just get things flowing and get yourself familiar with the process. And then as you start to actually construct something later, it will be much easier to do that.
can I just throw one thing out? Oh, Ebru Dorman has a question. Go ahead. Your questions. Let's take that.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Justin. Great, very informative presentation. I was wondering if you could tell us about the supplemental questions and how they weigh relative to the personal statement in the overall scoring. And what should we as parents or students make of the supplemental questions in terms of the style of the school, personality of the school, etc.?
That's a great question. I think this will probably depend from university to university. So I would say it's definitely probably not as important as the personal essay, but for very competitive institutions, this can be really the final bit and kind of figuring out the fit of the student. So it's important to be able to make that connection, again, particularly if it is a really competitive school, to show that the student has not only the grades and the activities and the commitment and kind of leadership accomplishments, but also is a good match for that school. So I would say that's at the very last stage of selection, when we're really looking for students that stand out, that not only are showing us that they not only have the academic ability to succeed on campus, they're admissible in that way, but furthermore, they will be able to contribute to the campus and contribute to this class. So I would say it is really important, but again, it's kind of hard to say one area is more important than the other. It really is kind of this Venn diagram, without one of the middle kind of falls out. But I would say it is important at least to just make that connection. If they're asking why us, to be able to give a personal response to that at the end. And I know some institutions have things that aren't that style of question. And in fact, NYU last year discontinued this question. We now only have an optional question that asks them to respond to a quote from an NYU commencement speaker or alumni. And it is absolutely optional. It really, won't make a bearing one way or another. It's just a fun thing if students want to share information, but it won't, become a deciding factor. So I think you'll really have to look at each institution to see, if it is truly optional, or if it's something that they really want to hear about.
So when they say optional, we should believe that it's really optional.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. When they say that it's optional, it completely is. I think it's really, in the case of NYU, we put that there just because we felt that some students might have something else about their background that they want to share to make sure that we know, and we wanted to give them a place to do that. If they felt like it wasn't, anywhere else in the application, but it is truly optional.
Thank you.
So we have
Welcome.
another question just came in. They're asking if there might be a situation where an essay is very good for one admission officer, but not good enough in a second read, for instance.
Probably. I mean, everyone, because
A lot
in
of
most
different
cases,
views.
this is read, by a committee. It may not just be one pair of eyes on an essay, and I mean, it happens. But at the end of the day, this is about consensus. If it comes down to, making those decisions, if something's kind of on the fence. But I would say in general, it's rare. Something might be on a topic that's more interesting to one admissions officer than another, but that doesn't have an effect on the application. If an essay is well written and gives us the information, that's the important part. Of course, we can have personal favorites that we appreciate just on a creative scale, but it's not about being good enough or not good enough overall. It contributes to this whole holistic overview of a student.
Good questions coming through.
Yeah, these are fantastic.
Folks are thinking seriously about the process, which is really good to see. But I loved hearing the few questions, the students earlier asking such, answering and asking and engaging in this in a very, very aware fashion. So that's really nice to see. I know you're all gonna write like wonderful essays this year. Anyone else?
And before I forget, I'm going to share my contact
Yes, thank you.
details in the chat. So I actually have a link to my calendar where you can basically, you'll find my email address there, but you'll also be able to schedule a one-on-one with me. So if you're interested in applying to NYU Abu Dhabi, if you do a little bit of research and this is a thing that you want to do, I'm more than happy to have a one-on-one conversation. That link will give you access to my email, and you can also just schedule a 30-minute slot in my calendar and we can talk about the university and the application process. And this is my role. I didn't state at the beginning, but my role as an outreach officer is kind of like an interpreter. So there are a number of outreach officers like myself all over the world. And our job is really to help the students and parents and schools and counselors understand this process and understand this university, understand NYU and Abu Dhabi and the whole prospect of this amazing place. And by the same turn, I also help admissions understand the students and the academic context. So it's really a two-way conversation. If there's an application of a really strong student from Turkey, I talk with admissions and I help them understand, the context of the school, the grades, any awards they may have won. So fortunately, I'm in the position where I don't have to make any of the hard decisions, but I just make sure that both sides completely understand the process. And so if you are interested in applying, I'm more than happy to continue the conversation with you.
Thank you, thank you. So that might be the end of the evening if there are no other questions then. I just want to point out, yeah, Adnan, I'll read that. So we did get one question. I just also want to point out that in the beginning in the chat, you can find the Admittance Education Instagram, which is how you can find out about events like this. And also the recordings will be on the YouTube channel. So I'll put this one there as well, and I'll stop the recording now. There's one other question I'm going to also